Richard Tiffany Gere, born on August 31st, 1949 in Philadelphia, spent most of his early years in Syracuse, New York. A small town with a population of just 5,000, Syracuse was the setting for Richard's restless childhood. His father, Homer George Gere, worked as an insurance agent but had aspirations of becoming a Methodist minister. The family was deeply religious, and Homer's compassion extended beyond his job, as he became the go-to figure in the community whenever someone needed help. Richard's mother, Doris Ann, filled their modest home with warmth and music. Growing up, Richard was the second of 5 children, and from a young age, he exhibited a keen interest in philosophy and the arts. A natural gymnast and musician, Richard also excelled at trumpet, piano, and guitar, showing early signs of talent and a yearning for something more than small-town life could offer. The search for meaning. Richard's intellectual curiosity led him to philosophy at the University of Massachusetts Amherst, where he sought answers to the big questions of existence. Unlike his peers who chose practical career paths, Richard dove into the study of philosophy, particularly the works of Jean-Paul Sartre. This wasn't just an academic interest for him. It was a way to understand the world around him. Richard struggled with the disconnect between his Methodist upbringing and his need for deeper meaning in life. Despite his family's religious influence, he felt drawn to something beyond the conventional answers. His search for truth led him to Buddhism, a path that resonated deeply with him. He spent months in New York practicing Zen and Tai Chi, eventually traveling to Tibet to meet Tibetan monks and the Dalai Lama, which further shaped his spiritual journey. The path to acting. By his early 20s, Richard had left college, choosing to pursue acting rather than a more traditional career. His father, although supportive, must have been bewildered by his son's decision to walk away from a promising academic future. In 1969, Richard moved to New York City, where he found work at the Seattle Repertory Theater and Provincetown Playhouse on Cape Cod. His big break came in 1973 when he landed a role in the original London stage production of Grease. But it wasn't the glitzy, polished version of the film. It was raw and unrefined. And Richard played Danny Zuko before John Travolta ever slicked back his hair. The role marked the beginning of his rise in the theater world, but it was just the start of a much bigger journey. Hollywood beckons. By the late 1970s, Richard's career began to shift from theater to film. His breakout role in American Gigolo in 1980 turned him into a Hollywood sensation. He became a symbol of sex appeal and charm, capturing the hearts of millions. It was a thrilling time for him. As he saw his name in lights and his face on magazine covers. However, as much as Richard appreciated the fame, it was also an ironic experience for someone who had spent hours each day meditating and striving for spiritual detachment. Hollywood was a world built on ego and excess, and Richard, who had practiced Buddhism and sought inner peace, found the dichotomy of fame and his spiritual path difficult to reconcile. Spiritual awakening in Nepal. In 1978, Richard's spiritual journey took him to Nepal, where he met Tibetan monks and lamas who shared a philosophy that resonated with him on a profound level. It was there that he met the Dalai Lama, whose teachings would dramatically alter Richard's perspective on life and acting. The Dalai Lama challenged everything Richard had learned about acting, particularly the Stanislavski method, which emphasizes emotional recall and connecting with the character's feelings. The Dalai Lama, however, taught that emotions held no intrinsic value. This was a profound realization for Richard, one that completely reshaped his approach to acting. Instead of simply channeling emotions, he learned to detach from them, focusing on being present rather than performing. A Hollywood star in conflict. Despite his spiritual growth, Richard's Hollywood career continued to skyrocket in the 1980s. Films like An Officer and a Gentleman and Pretty Woman cemented his status as a global sex symbol and one of Hollywood's leading men. But as his fame grew, so did his internal conflict. The more successful he became, the more disillusioned he felt by the superficiality of the entertainment industry. By the late 1980s, Richard began to speak out publicly about the issues that mattered most to him, particularly his activism for Tibet and his vocal opposition to China's human rights abuses. His outspokenness alienated him from Hollywood, which relied heavily on its lucrative ties to China. Studios began to distance themselves from him, and his career, once soaring, began to falter. The price of speaking out. Richard's outspoken stance against China's actions in Tibet came to a head in 1993 at the Academy Awards. Instead of simply presenting an award, he used the global platform to denounce the Chinese government. The backlash was swift and severe. Hollywood studios, many of which had lucrative deals with China, saw Richard as a liability. His career quickly cooled as major studios stopped calling. Roles that had once been offered to him were now being given to other actors. Richard had chosen principle over profit, and the price was steep. But despite the professional fallout, he remained resolute in his beliefs. He would later reflect, "I don't regret it for a second." A personal life in the spotlight. While Richard's career took a hit, his personal life blossomed in the early 1990s. In 1988, he met supermodel Cindy Crawford, and their chemistry was instant. Despite the 17-year age gap, they bonded over their shared interest in Buddhism and their desire to escape the pressures of fame. They married in a spontaneous Las Vegas ceremony in 1991, but the marriage quickly faced difficulties. As their relationship played out in the tabloids, rumors about their marriage circulated, questioning its authenticity. In 1994, they took out a full-page ad in the Times of London to defend their relationship, but instead of silencing the rumors, it only fueled them. By the end of the year, Richard and Cindy separated after just 4 years of marriage. The decline of Hollywood's golden boy. In the years that followed, Richard's career continued to decline, and Hollywood continued to turn its back on him. The roles that once made him a star were now few and far between. As the industry increasingly embraced blockbuster franchises, Richard's dedication to his spiritual path and activism made him an outsider. He no longer sought the fame or adoration that had once seemed so appealing. Instead, he embraced a life of purpose that transcended the superficial pursuits of Hollywood. In his 70s, Richard had moved to Madrid, living quietly with 2 young sons and finding peace away from the industry that had once made him a household name. A life of peace and exile. At 76, Richard Gere lives a life far removed from the Hollywood glitz and glamour. He chose exile, not out of disgrace or failure, but out of a desire for inner peace. His spiritual journey and dedication to activism ultimately cost him his career, but in return he found a sense of fulfillment that Hollywood could never provide. Living in Madrid with his children, Richard has discovered that true peace doesn't come from fame or wealth, but from a life lived with purpose, compassion, and authenticity. While Hollywood may have erased him from its history books, Richard Gere's legacy is not defined by the roles he played, but by the values he chose to uphold.